Well, it's no secret Americans from all sides of the political spectrum don't have a lot of faith in our election system. And that's bad for the integrity of, well, pretty much every other piece of our government apparatus. But Dr. John Lott has a solution to this problem. Writing in the Federalist yesterday with Stephen M. Smith that in order to restore Americans' faith in elections, we have to fix sloppy record keeping. With me to explain what he means is Dr. John Lott. Doctor, good to see you as always.
Great to talk to you.
So give me an idea, sloppy record keeping. Now, I know in Michigan where I live, there's this fight, and I don't understand it. The Secretary of State fighting to not have people that are deceased, 35,000, give or take, taken off the voter rolls. Makes no sense whatsoever. But what do you mean about sloppy record keeping?
Right. Well, I thought it was going to be an easy task to begin with. We wanted to see whether the number of ballots counted in different precincts across the country was equal to the number of people listed as voting. You would think those two things should match up pretty easily. If you look at the 14 swing states in the election and we looked at the 100 most populous counties in those states, 94 of those 100 counties did not keep records on who actually voted on election day. And then for the 6 counties that did, there was a huge gap between the number of ballots counted and the number of people who are listed as voting. In some precincts, in most precincts, you had a lot more ballots counted than you had people listed as voting. And in some precincts, you had the opposite occur. The reason why we wanted to look at this to begin with is that there was a lot of allegations of shenanigans with regard to the election. And so if you have a situation where ballots are run through the counting machine multiple times, you could end up with a situation where you have more ballots counted than people listed as voting. And if you had the destruction of ballots in some places, then you could end up with more people listed as voting than you had ballots counted. And it seems like in counties all across the country, either they can't tell you whether that's happening in the vast majority of cases, or when they can.
Right, and from what I read, John, if I may be so bold here, from what I read, the number in Arizona was 5 times what the margin of victory was allegedly for Joe Biden, at about 10,600, but ballots overcounted, more ballots than people is several times larger. Is that correct?
Right. Well, I mean, there are problems with a lot of those numbers. It turns out the Arizona numbers, in the end, they didn't actually have a list of who actually voted in the election. That's one problem that was there. But for places that do have it, for example, Cobb County in Georgia, they had about 34,000 more ballots counted than they had people listed as voting. And they claim to have actually had the data there. So Biden won Georgia by 11,000 votes. You had very close Senate races that had occurred. And here you have just one county in the state. You have almost 34,000 more ballots counted than people.
Well, then just stop right there. How can we have any faith whatsoever? Because, the Democrats mock anybody who questions the outcome of the 2020 election. You just told me that one county, Cobb County, had 34,000 more ballots than voters. The state was decided by about 11,000 votes, allegedly. How can we have any faith at all in what happened there?
It raises real questions. One can only imagine what the errors might be in the rest of the state. I mean, Cobb County is not the most populous county in Georgia. Or you can look at Florida. We have 2 counties in Florida that claim that they actually have the data from the 2020 election. In Dade County, you have a gap of about 16,000 votes. And in Orange County, Florida, you have a gap of about 25,000 votes. So there you have a gap of over 40,000 votes between those 2 counties, just 2 counties in the state. So, and you see that in other places too. So it raises real concerns. I mean, who knows exactly what was happening in those counties? But when you have such large errors there, there's a lot of elections that could be called into question.
Well, clearly. There's no, so my theory's always been going back to paper ballots, punch ballots, tabulators, and the computers that it goes through one. Of course, I suppose you could run those through 100 times too, but what is the solution, John?
Well, there's the 1960 Civil Rights Act that requires that for all federal elections, local and state election officials are required to keep all relevant records for 22 months after the election. And what's happening is, let's say you have an Excel file with a list of who voted in the election. They immediately start saving over the file within a day or two after the election if there's some change that they have. And so, it'd be one thing if people use computers, you can rename the file, you can put a date on it, and you can just save it on the side. We're not talking about large amounts of data here. Instead, they don't keep the original file. They're constantly saving it over, and so they can't tell you who voted in the election. You talk to state election officials, legislators, they just assume that they can go and get a list of who actually voted in the election. They are stunned to hear that across the country, these basic, simple records aren't being kept. And we're talking about just a trivial thing, just rename the file, save it. It's not going to deal with all questions with regard to election integrity. IDs stuff are a completely different issue that's there. Mail-in ballots are a different issue. But just simply in terms of counting the ballots that are turned in, assuming that they're correct, you have these large issues that are there that are much larger than the difference in outcomes for many races.
Yeah, and I'll leave it here, but if the election had gone the other way by similar margins and these facts would remain true, if the Republican, regardless what the name of the Republican is, had won an election under the same circumstances, the Democrats, the media, Congress, they would have been relentless trying to figure out what's going on. But if Republicans ask, then you're a denier, you're a white supremacist, it's all these smear jobs, it's nonsense. Dr. John Lott, thank you for doing what you do because you find the real answers, you do it honestly, and the numbers don't add up. People need to know that. Thank you.
People can find our work at the website crimeresearch.org. We've shown all the Freedom of Information Act requests that are there so people can double check what we've done. It's all immediately available. This is the counties themselves claiming that they didn't keep the data, or if they did, this is the data that they gave us.
Crimeresearch.org. Dr. John Lott, thank you. There you have it. We need to have numbers that add up, don't you think? It's not a lot to ask, right? Coming up after the break, a possibility that the FBI search warrant to raid President Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago could be thrown out altogether, along with everything they found, meaning they sank whatever case it is they thought they might have had. It's coming up on ABL. Don't go anywhere.